Okay, so we're back. This is the Temple Challenge Cup, and this is Birmingham, and this is LaSalle University. So we'll see how this here gets going. All right, so here we are right off the start, and we're getting going again. This is killing me because we're into basically the semifinals and finals weekend, and I have not been able to watch any of it because, like I say, I'm doing this as we go. So this is right at the start. This is Birmingham. So if we look here, see how scrunched up this person is at the catch, and we compare him to somebody like this here, right? So when we see something like this here, this is a lot of tension in the shoulders. So that's not what we want, because again, that's going to put a lot of energy in these smaller muscles in the upper shoulders. It's going to tighten up the arms, etc. We want to just have a nice long arm hang here and really just let the shoulders relax. See, we're seeing some tension here as well. Remember, keep that distance between the ear and the shoulder, right? The bottom of the ear and the top of the shoulder. Here we can see it's closing up a lot, right? We see a bit of tension here as well. We see not a lot of distance here, right? Whereas these guys here, we see the heads are up really tall. The arms are hanging nicely. That's what we want to do. That's going to really allow that power from the leg drive to, assuming we're keeping that body angle nice and straight, to lock it in. It's going to allow the power to transfer from the leg drive through those big, strong leg muscles, the hips, etc., all the way up through the body, out to the handle, and all the way out to the spoon. Right? Once we start doing this here, we're going to be holding a lot of that tension in those biceps. Right? We're not going to let that sort of pass through quite as nice. These muscles are going to get tired, and like I say, when we get halfway, 2/3, 3/4 of the way down the course, we're going to start finding that the energy we wasted doing this is going to start to come back to bite us, because we're going to start to poop out a little bit. We're going to feel that burn just a little bit more acutely than we would like to. Okay, now, LaSalle may go on to win this. They may not go on to win this, but my prediction is that they will not be one of the top crews to beat. Again, we're right in the start here, so this is where everybody's still jacked up, right? But we look here, we take the catch, pretty decent compression by them. We've got nice forward pivot there. And as we come through here, see here, we're seeing the blades go deep. We see a lot of this extra drag coming through. That's not what we want to see. See this big sheet of water here on the shaft? That tells us that we've probably got a little more drag than we want to have happen. See, we've got a little too much depth on that blade, and it makes it hard to get out of the water. And if we're too deep on the blade, another thing that happens is it's tougher to get the blade out of the water, because when we push down, we have to push down further to get that blade out. But now there's more weight, I'll say, of the water on top of the blade and the blade shaft. So as we push it down, it's going to want to pull that boat down to our side. So that's going to offset the balance. Whereas if we just have that spoon underneath, the spoon is very much, I mean, we call them the blades, right? It's very much like a blade. So it's just going to cut out, and it's very thin. So it's going to slice its way out of the water without causing too much hassle. You get the shaft in the water, though, and now you've got a lot of turbulence going on around it, and then you try to lift it out of the water. There's going to be a lot of drag force keeping that blade in the water that's going to pull the boat over to your side. So number one, you're slowing it down because of all those drag forces. But number two, you're also going to upset the balance of the boat because of all that weight that's on that blade shaft. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that that blade comes out as nice and smoothly as possible. Oops, here, hang on. Hit the wrong button. We're going to mute that. We're going to go forward. See, and again, we see a lot of this extra water going around these blade shafts. So we don't want this. See, look at this. Look at all this kind of extra turbulence that we're fighting against, right? And boom, see there? Did you see? Look at all that water here. Look at this. We're going to back it up a couple frames. Look at this. See all that stuff coming up the shaft, right? We don't want to see that. If we can avoid that at all, that is a great thing. All right, so we're still fairly close to the start here. But one thing that Birmingham is doing pretty good here is, if we look at their extractions, see, we're seeing a lot of that blade come out before we have that feather occur, and then the bottom comes up to the top, so the blades stay up fairly high. So that's good. They set that blade height very early in the release process, and then they keep it high through the recovery process. So that's good. But one thing that we're seeing here now is watch how they're rowing these blades in rather than placing them and then driving. So now the blades are not all in here. Obviously, there's a little bit of timing, but that's not too big, and we're not talking about that. So now the blades are finally, we still see a little bit, boom, now they're buried, right? So the blades are pretty much buried. We'll say, there, all the blades, we'll call it buried. This guy's not quite there, but look at how far into the drive this guy is. Look how far into the drive this guy is, right? So we see, number one, differences in shin position. So this guy here's well into the drive, but this guy's still way up there, right? So that's a disparate application of force. We don't want that. But again, before these blades are buried, a lot of times, they're well into their drive phase, right? So here, boom, he's buried now, but the shins are basically, he's almost halfway through that drive, right, with the legs. So we want to make sure that we have that blade planted before we really engage that leg drive, because that's going to maximize the amount of power that we can get from that leg push. If we start that leg drive too early, especially at the top end, we're going to lose out on a lot of really valuable power that we have. And that's what these guys are doing right now a little bit at the top end, right? And when you come up against a crew that's pretty strong, you can't afford to have any mistakes. You want to be as rock solid as possible so that you're not giving away any speed. You are just going to keep every bit of power and speed that you're putting into it, moving that boat towards the bow. All right, here we are again, coming down, and now we're going to look a little bit more at LaSalle. So we're coming up to the catch. Look how late bow seat leaves this square, like just before they go in. I'm not a big fan of that. So we do see a little bit of discrepancies here on blade entry, but we can see that they're rowing it in as well as this other crew was, right? See how those blades are really moving forward a lot. And look at kind of how much, before the blade is fully buried, look at how much movement there is. So we're just going to look at two-seat here, just because he's close to us, right? Look at how much he moves there, and now that blade is kind of fully engaged, right? Boom, right there. So we're going to back up. Look at how much movement there was, right? But it's not just him we see. Look at this. Look at this guy here, right? 6-seat. Again, we're not dead side on them, so we can't see point of maximum compression and where exactly that is, but we're definitely, if we kind of look at those shins, it looks like it's probably about here is that point of maximum compression. No real movement, and boom, now the blade is buried there. How much did we move there before we got that from point of maximum compression to blade buried and actually engaged on the water? We're going to mute that. So that's, see, look at that, right? So there's some sort of rowing it in, slapping it against the water. And again, they just look a little bit rushed getting to the catch to me, right? They should have a really, really strong release. Get the hands away, pivot the body over, and then just float in just a little bit more up those last few inches. Just let that boat utilize the run. And we can see here, they're not getting tremendous clearance on those puddles, right? They're landing kind of in the back half of the puddle. So they can let that boat run just a little bit more and stretch that out. You know, give themselves even half a foot more of clearance on that puddle. And they're going to be getting much better run. And they can do that just by easing their way into the catch, right? This seems like they're still trying to rush through this process a little bit to me. So what I was going to say is if we watch the other crew here, sorry, I forgot to say it. I actually, in a lot of ways, I kind of like the rhythm of this losing boat better. I just think they probably have other issues, and they may not be as physically gifted as these people here. But if we watch them go, they have a pretty decent rhythm. See, they're not rushing it in. They're not hurrying through the process. This guy here, 5-seat, needs to be a little bit sharper on his entry sometimes. But that's not too bad, right? That's the rhythm and stuff, and the flow of that boat looks pretty good. This one here just looks a little bit more hectic at the top end, but I feel that these guys probably are physically superior to that other crew. And again, it's not like the difference is huge. It's not like these guys are doing terrible, but when we look at how much clearance they're getting, see, look at that, not much clearance, right? Over the last 6 inches of that recovery, just soften it, just ease in there, almost kind of stop coming up the slide and let the boat pass underneath you. And then you place the blade as you get to that point of maximum compression. That's going to probably serve them a little bit better. All right, so we're gonna meet this here, and so now we see a head-on shot here. You see, this is what I mean, like this crew here is doing pretty good. If we look at the height on these blades, there's a lot of unity there. There's a lot of unity on that crew and their blade work. Same thing here, but we see a little bit more disparity here with these blades, right? And this is what I'm saying. We're seeing just a little bit of blade work issues as we're coming up. See that? Boat's a little off center there. But this isn't too bad, right? This is still pretty good. But see here, we see this separation. So this is definitely a good crew. I would say that they're not necessarily, see here, we see differences. This here's going to be different timings and amounts of extraction at the release. We see some, a little bit of separation here. And again, it's never going to be 100% dead on. It's not. But when I'm comparing this to what we see from some of the real top dog crews, this is probably not quite as tight as we would see on some of those other crews. My point, though, was not actually to talk about these guys. It was to talk about these guys here, right? Where we look at sort of how they... Oh, that's not one of their better moments. But we do see some pretty good unity on these blades from them. We do see some pretty nice unity, right? Oh, it's separating a little bit there. So there you go. So I think that these guys here, actually, they've got a pretty nice rhythm, and they've got the blade work coming pretty good. These guys are going to win. These guys are clearly the better crew, but that other crew is performing well despite, suffering a pretty significant loss. So, and significant, I mean by distance, not by just getting crushed or it's our season ruining loss. It's they're being beaten by a better crew. All right, next race, I haven't even heard who these people are or what event this is, but I will say this: we've basically heard attention. We still see a blade popping out here. We see a blade popping out here. We see the blades not aligned here. Right, we see all these people at kind of different spots. So I don't really like what I'm seeing here. I think that this crew probably right now looks a little better. I like their forward angle more than I like these guys. These guys are well off the thighs. So it looks like they may have I haven't seen a single stroke of this race, but my gut tells me that these guys will probably row a shorter stroke and be more upright through it. And that they're going to be just a little bit more chaotic. We will see if that happens, but when I see something like this off the start right away, I say that is a crew that is not precise at the start. That's not an attention to detail element, right? They're just sort of letting that happen rather than having everything fully locked in. You should be able to basically tie strings that goes from here to here to here to here and have that string be equidistant sections with nothing too taut and nothing too loose. Everything just nice and snugged up. Right? When we see this here, that's definitely not something that we could tie one nice string to and have a unified and the same length of strand and the same tautness of strand. Right? Whereas over here, it's much closer to that nice and even thing, even spacing. All right, so this is literally, we've just heard go. And much as I kind of predicted, if you look at these guys here off the start, notice the layback kind of stops, and then they pull it in with the arms. And again, to me, not a strong way to do it. And look at how much tension this guy has in the upper chest and body. Same thing here, lots of tension in that upper body. Look here, it's a lot of pull rather than draw. Right? We don't want to be pulling. We don't want to pull. We're using too small a muscle if we pull that blade rather than draw it in using the bigger, stronger back muscles. And that's no good. And we put a lot of tension in those shoulders, a lot of tension in those biceps. That's not really what we want. Right? Then we look over here, we see a little bit more layback from these guys. As we move on to the next stroke here. See, still very upright here. And we go back here and we start seeing layback. This guy's very upright. But these guys here, they've got good sort of layback amount. So I think these guys are going to be getting much better engagement from that core. They're going to get much better power application on the end of the blade. It's going to be a smoother, more comfortable start for them. All right, so we can see that, not too far into the race, because there's the end of the island. King's College School, this is a PE Cup, Princess Elizabeth, so the King's College, and I can't remember what that one was. Anyway, we can see that these guys here have taken a pretty good lead. So we see a little bit of discrepancy on blade heights through the recovery. Timing of the squaring up, though, look at this. This is good, right? These guys are squaring up pretty much in unison. The blades are all hitting the water pretty close to the same time. They're getting a nice solid drive. They come out, boom, feather up pretty high above the water. They're getting decent clearance. And again, we come up, we see a lot of squaring at the same time. So when we see something like this, that is a well-unified crew. This is a crew that does have attention to detail, right? People aren't just coming up and happening to square the blades and happening to drop them into the water and happening to extract them and happening to feather them. This is a crew that has done a lot of work together, and they have focused on making sure that they are rowing as a crew rather than 8 people just rowing together in a boat. This looks very unified. This is pretty solid stuff here, right? And if you can get 8 people squaring up like this here, especially this is a junior crew, so this is very solid performance, right? Again, we see a little bit of timing issues, but you're never always going to be perfect. Look at how close these blades are, though. For hitting the water pretty much, boom, on the same frame they're going in. There are slightly different heights, but they all go in at that same frame, so that's pretty close together, right? That's better than a lot of older, perhaps more experienced crews do. So kudos to them. This looks sharp. Okay, so now we're just a few strokes ahead of where I last left off. And they're coming right past the camera angle here. One thing that I look for when people are rowing is, when do the shoulders pass the hips? Now, ideally, again, you're going to have that body angle not move during the leg drive, right? Because that's going to allow us to maximize that press of the legs and all these big, strong muscles of the legs propelling that boat. But one thing I will be forgiving on of that is that if we can hold the shoulder in front of the hip through the majority of that leg drive, that tells us that we're not really opening too much with the body. Now, so when we get here, we're going to watch, when do the shoulders pass the hips? And look at this guy. He's still in front of the hips a little bit there. Legs are almost done. Still in front of the hip. Legs are done. This is sort of just over top of the hips. Legs are virtually done. Still a little forward angle. Legs are almost done. So again, these guys are doing a really nice job of maximizing the output from the legs before they transition into that upper body, right? It's a good push with the legs, then they're laying the body back, and then they draw it in. Now, if it was me, I would probably coach them to lay back just a little bit more and perhaps push those shoulders a little bit more past the torso. The way I almost think about it is down here, sort of opposite your belly button. It's kind of like you're pushing your spine through to try and get it to touch your belly button, right? We sort of push that through. That's going to keep that body nice and upright. And these guys are upright. These guys are definitely upright. You know what I mean? But it's going to let you get a little bit more laid back and really open up here and get that the shoulders passing the torso, opening up and expanding that chest just a little bit more. So if it was me, I might focus on that. But again, this looks solid, right? I think they could use a little more layback just to squeeze it in there, give it a little more snap off the extraction. But this is pretty solid stuff, right? The way that they hold those bodies, that's nice. This is something completely unrelated to anything to do with technique or the speed of a cruise. So this school is Great Marlow. That's who it is. So if we look at these blades here, this is exactly why I say when you put blades down on the ground, they go tips down. We don't put the back side of the blade on the ground. We put the tip down so it protects the paint on the blade. To me, it just looks freaking bad. Okay. This here just looks bad. And I tend to be somewhat of the opinion that, if you don't look good, you probably won't row well. because it's a mindset. How pristine is everything? This might be completely freaking erroneous. This might be completely wrong. It's just a personal preference to me. It's just a personal thing. When I see blades like this, I go, oh, like they can't even take care of the blades, right? They can't even care about what their equipment looks like. How are they going to get on the water and care about doing the greatest job possible? And I am not at all saying that that is the attitude of these guys in the boat. This is just something personally that I feel, right? It's just something personal. So when I coach people, it is tips down when we put those blades down on the dock before we get going, because I just, it freaking drives me crazy seeing stuff like this. That's just me. It's not a comment on these guys, their coaches, or their mindset at all, because I fully realize that one thing may not at all have to do with the other, but for me, it jumps out. All right, so here we are in the coxless fours for the Y-fold, and we're just going to watch this crew here. These are the guys that are currently winning. But here's what I want to look at. See here? Look at how much the arms are already bent. We can't see really where this is, but the shoulders are still in front of the hips, legs are still bent, and the arms are bent. So that's not something we want to see. We want to see much more hang, and I understand that this here is just barely on the screen, but look at this. There's tension in those arms for sure, right? And as we come through, you're going to see that tension in the shoulders. Gets very tight there. This guy here as well, look at this. Notice how he cuts it short, right? So he's kind of over top. He's rounded over the top of that blade rather than keeping the spine towards the belly button, shoulders going back, and elbows kind of nice and out. And out, not like the chicken dance, but sort of just nice and open in a natural, powerful position. Right? We're going to watch this here again. Next stroke, he comes up. And see here, there's this bit of wind up. See right there, right? There's a little bit of shooting the slide there that now the hands come up to place the blade in the water. Right, so we see this here, and that's kind of winding, and now it rows it in, and boom, he takes the weight, opening up a little bit early, I think, and we can see here that outside shoulder's coming up. It's taking more tension. See, same thing here, right? It's more tense than it needs to be. These outside shoulders, they can move forward and back on the torso, but we never want to see any upward motion on that shoulder. We can see it forward and back, lots of room between the ear and the shoulder. That's going to keep it low, and forward and back is okay, but seeing it raise like we see here with these guys a bit, right? Keeping it there, that's tense. So they're bracing against the weight of the blade rather than just hanging off the weight of the blade. We don't want to do that. We want to just let those shoulders hang nice and relaxed. Leaning out a little bit here. So these guys here, they're winning, right? And again, if you're winning a race at Henley, you are not a bad crew. But do I think that these guys will be one of the big heavy hitter players? Probably not. I just think there are some issues that they have, right? See this guy here, if we were to be swung around to the front of the boat, to the stern, I'm guessing he's leaning out a little bit, leaning away from the rigger just a little bit rather than keeping his body more centered, or turning the shoulders to, not fully match the handle, but somewhat match the handle's angle, right? Same thing here, right? See, leaning away from his rigger. We don't want to be doing that. We want to be nice and centered over that boat. See there, and you can see there, right? Look at this, rowing it in. It's moving forward before it enters the water. That's what we saw with this guy as well, from looking at the hip, and when the hands were moving, they were a little out of sync. Right? But again, they're clearly moving the boat well. They're clearly strong, fit. They're winning a race. Completely apropos of nothing, I don't like horizontal stripes like this on uniforms, not when they're this size. I don't mind bigger horizontal stripes, but I don't like these little horizontal stripes. It always looks slow to me. I don't know why, but something about it just looks blocky and slow. So if I was wearing one of those singlets or unis, I just feel like I would be a slower rower wearing it, which I know is probably a silly thought, but hey, what do you do? So they've called attention. We see blades popping up, blades popping up, blades popping up. So 3 of the 4 blades that we see here are popping up. These guys have got 2 blades up. Again, to me, it's a small attention to detail. Just bury the blade, lock it in. You're right at the start. Just get the blade locked. It's not that hard. Okay, so right off the start here, we're still within the island, I believe. Or actually, I guess not, because the boat is right on the shore here, so they've probably just come off the island. Anyway, we've already seen this guy here, and if you go and watch this race, you'll see it. Bousy tends to go in too late on the catch. Now, what we're going to watch here is this. See, notice as we get to this point here, we're both pretty even. We're looking at the point of maximum compression. He compresses a little bit more here, but this is good. What we see here from 3 seat is actually pretty good. Notice his blade is moving down towards the water while he's still compressing. Right, there's a little bit of compression coming in there as that blade is going in. So he's going to be much closer to taking that water, that catch, as he hits the point of maximum compression, which is what we want. So this is really good. Now we're going to go to this guy here and we're going to find where's his point of maximum compression there. So he's not moving. You look at the shins, he's not moving at all. But while he's not moving at all here, he should at least be lifting those hands to place it in. But look at this. There's no movement at all. Like his whole body is just frozen in place while everybody else, look at the hands. They're moving, moving, moving. This guy's just sitting there doing nothing. That's dead time, okay? You've come up the slide, you've gotten to the point of the catch, but we've placed all of that weight coming against the momentum of the boat onto the foot plate to have that big increase in weight, I'll say. Like that jump on the scale and we land, thud, and it shows higher than what we actually weigh, right? And he's just sitting there rather than saying, okay, now I got to get that boat going. I have to get that blade in and re-accelerate this boat now. He's saying, oh, man, taking a stroke is just so hard. I think I'll sit here and rest up for a second, because he literally does not move, right? And then he starts to move. And now that hesitation, look at this. Now they're out of time. Whereas when we were here, boom, look at that. We're looking good. We're good with each other. And now he just hangs out there, and now he's out of time. So you never want to be the person that's just hanging around doing nothing, right? If we're just sitting there at any point and we stop, that's never a good thing. It's like the pedals on a bicycle. There's no stop in there. They keep moving, they keep moving, they keep moving at all points. That has to be us. We have to always keep moving. Now, yes, I know according to physics, there is a point where we will stop because we have to change direction. Whereas in a bicycle, we don't really change direction. We just keep going in the same cycle. But we want to think of our stroke as a continuous motion. It's like an oval. We're going up and back and up and back and up and back. So we want to keep that continuity through the entire stroke. And there's a perfect example of what it looks like when somebody actually stops rather than continuing through the cycle. All right, now this boat here that's passing in front of us, they are the lead boat. I'm not sure which crew it is actually, so I apologize. I don't like seeing this sort of C shape. I much prefer this. This to me is going to transfer that power a lot more effectively, and this kind of funnels the forces into the spine, right? It's like that bow. If we pull the bow, that point that it's going to snap, if we pull that string far enough, that's where all the force gathers basically. So we look at this here, and that's where it is, and that's on those vertebrae. If we have something like this here, that shows that the muscles in here are braced really nicely to me against that weight. They're holding it. They're not putting it onto the spine as much as the body is taking it, right? And that's going to be much better for long-term back health, I believe, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving any medical advice. But when I see something like this, all I think is, like the vertebrae in there, the forces that are like pulling on them, it's just going to be putting a lot of strain in there, right? A lot of strain. Then we come to the release. And here again, do we see the shoulders really go back and open up? Not so much. We still see a lot of roundness, and the shoulder is still very sort of neutral here, whereas it could be pushed back a little bit more, I think, right? And opened up through that release. So I think we could get a little bit more send just prior to the release here. See here again, pulling it in, the shoulders are very squared to the torso. This looks like it's a little more open in this gentleman here, but very upright. So like I say, I'd probably try to work a little bit on getting just a bit more out of the release. That's going to give them a little more send, but this is a pretty decent looking crew. This is a pretty decent looking crew. We're going to mute it. See, they get good releases. Boom, blade height gets pretty good. They get nice run on it. So that's a pretty solid crew. Yeah, so watching them come in here, they've got a decent lead. They haven't really pushed out too much, but they have got a decent solid lead. Again, I would like to see them just be a little bit stronger through that release. Get good, more length. These guys hung in there pretty decently. They made a run of it, and they kept on pushing. So, good job for them. They got beat noticeably, but still, they kept it interesting. They kept the other crew honest. So, good job to them. All right, so this is the next race. This is Molesey on the far side, and I think they said Norwich. I think Norwich, something like that, on the near side. So again, at the release position here, right, we see that, to me, we should maybe be a little closer to the handles, really get a nice good draw all the way to the body. But see here how the chin is starting to drop. We want to keep this head up. We want to keep those eyes forward. We want to keep this neck from dropping forward. When the head starts to drop down, the body tends to follow. The more we can keep that head upright, the more it's going to help pull that body nice and tall. This is probably just a touch too much layback. But here we've got the shoulder, and we can see the shoulder is still in a pretty neutral position. So I would say work to get the shoulders getting pulled back a little bit more by these muscles in the back. That's going to allow you to get a good draw to the body and really power that blade over those last few inches in the water to get, see, look at this. Because if we're not close enough to really do that, then we end up pulling with the arms. Right, we end up putting that weight on the arms. We don't want to do that. And look at this. Look how kind of rounded it is here. Same thing here. Look how rounded. We're not really driving the shoulders, or the shoulders back past the torso. And that's what I would do. I would really want to try to push that back a little bit, get some snap on the end of the blade. Very tight race so far, though, between these two crews. I haven't really looked much at the other crew. We will see if I get a better shot of them as it continues. All right, so now we're looking at Molesey here. And I think they have a bit of a lead. Now, when they do the extraction, and again, these guys don't look bad. These guys don't look bad. But we see some discrepancies here in the distance between the blades. And watch how this kind of separates. See there how we see this gap appearing. That tells me that 3-seat is probably rushing up the slide a little bit on stroke seat. The timing at entry is not too bad, right? Especially this side's a little better than this side. But it's not too bad. But see, they go in. We see some spacing issues here. We're going to advance and watch again for that gap, right? See, we got a gap here at the extraction. And then we see, look at this. Right here, these two blades are sort of overlapped. Now, they're not actually overlapped. It just appears that way, obviously, because of the angle. But see how much that gap opens up here, right? So we see differences in how they're coming out of bound, progressing up the slide. We're seeing similar stuff here, right? Look at the gaps that are there as well. So there we see again some issues with blade height there and timing. This obviously is slightly offset stroke or off balance. And again, we're looking for gaps, right? There's the gap. There's the gap. Now we come up again, we see this gap start to open up, so we know that there's a difference in how these two people, stroke seat and 3-seat, are coming up the slide and how they're working together. And over the course of a 2,000 to 2,000 plus meter race, that does take a toll. It does sap some speed, right? So we want to be aware of all those forces, and we'll see how it pans out, because again, these guys are having similar issues, right? My gut says Molesey is going to be pulling this one out, but you never know. You never know how much they might have overexpended. It's a tight race. This looks pretty good. It's going to be an exciting watch. What a good race. This is tight, because Molesey had put a move in to get decently ahead, but these guys are just not freaking shutting it down, right? They're hanging in there. But here's one thing that we see as we come through. We're going to look at stroke seat here. And watch, these guys here are looking good, right? Heads are up, To me, it's a little bit too rounded on the back there. This, to me, is a much stronger position. Same thing here, right? It's kind of hunkered down. It's rounded. We don't want that. I like this much stronger position. But look at Stroke Seat's head. Okay? His head is very down. This guy's tired. But when you're tired, you have to, especially as Stroke Seat, right? Especially as Stroke Seat, you got to keep that head up. Keep everything tall. Keep everything proud. Because if this guy here, if your crew starts to kind of see you faltering, it will have an effect, right? It will have an effect. You should always project an image of strength and confidence as a Stroke Seat. And if I see my Stroke Seat start to slump down a little bit, I go, uh-oh, we might be getting, this boat might get a little heavy here. And will we be able to kick that right up when you need to? Now, again, if you've got a strong crew behind you and your 7 seats, pretty mentally tough, he's going to be able to keep pushing through that. But to me, you never want to let fatigue sap you and draw you down into the bottom of the boat. You need to stay nice and tall. Keep it pushing. But look at this. These guys are just hanging in here, right? Okay, so we're just after the start. Now, the commentators on this actually are talking about stuff that I have mentioned about how when you hear that attention, boom, you bury the blades to make sure that they are fully in, which is exactly right. Lock it in. And then the coxswain right off the start said draw instead of anything else, which I actually love hearing because that's what we want. We want to draw that blade, right? Or draw the handles to the body. Like I'm always saying, to me, it's never pull into the body. It's always draw the handles into the body. So I really like the terminology that this coxswain is using because I think it gives the image and the actual sort of motion that we want our crew to have. It gives them that reinforcement right off the start, that it's not just about yanking away on that blade, it's actually about drawing it into the body, right? I like that. Okay, so we're looking at this close crew, and I think they said this is Pangbourne, and I think that is St. Edward's over at the far side. And this is the Princess Elizabeth Cup. So what we're looking at here is the amount of drag. See the drag on the blades here, on the blade shafts, and it's so often off starts, people will have a lot of depth on the blades because you're overpowered by all the emotion and the, see, look how deep this blade is. Look how deep that blade is going into the water. That's a tremendous amount of drag. Look at this, a tremendous amount of drag. Look at this, a tremendous amount of drag. Right, this is, look at that. Look at how much that blade is pushing through the water rather than just locking and forcing the boat past the blade. Right, when we see something like this, we know that's just slowing the boat down. And this is the danger. If you let that emotion, that adrenaline take over, and you don't use your brain and use your control and trust the training that you've done, you end up in a situation where you're going to put that blade, you're going to have mechanics that are going on that are going to slow the boat down. You have to stick to what you've been working on. Right, just get the blade buried. That's it. Boom, right there. That's pretty much it. Right, that's all you need is kind of right here, right here. Just get that blade buried and then keep it straight across. And you can see here. Look at this. Right, look at how much water is coming off of that blade. Look at how much water is being stirred up there. Right. That's going to all work to slowing us down. We don't want to do that. So here we're looking at St. Edward's blades. This is still fairly early in the race. Look at that, nice burying. Right? We see all the tips right there, all the tips right there, and then just a little bit hanging back there. The timing is pretty good. We don't see any tremendous amount. We do see a little bit over the shafts, not a tremendous amount of drag. Then they come out here. Boom, they feather. They're all pretty high except for this guy. I would like to see a little more height, and we see here it drops back towards the water. From here, from that point of maximum set, we're going to see the blades drop down a little bit to the water, and then they swoop back up. But again, look at this timing. Look at this timing. Boom. Buried, right? All on the same frame, buried. So that's good. We see a little discrepancy here on the blade angles, but for blade work, this looks like pretty solid stuff. All come out, boom, get some nice good clearance. Again, I would push them up a little higher, but this is looking pretty solid stuff. So now we are a little further down the course, but again, we're going to look at the amount of turbulence around blades, and especially we're going to look at sort of 3-seat here. Oh, I didn't mute it. Here, hang on. Right? So look at this. Look at how much water is kind of coming up. Stroke seat as well, but look at that. Look at how much turbulence there was there. We're going to come to the next stroke. Look at this again, right? Turbulence, 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 and drag, right? Look at how high that sheet of water comes up that shaft, right? Compared to this guy, right? That's going to be slowing down the boat a lot. That's going to be not slowing down the boat a lot. So you get a few people, you get even 1 or 2 people in your boat doing this, and that's going to be sapping a lot of that strength. Don't do it. Just get the spoon buried, call it good, and get that blade through the water. St. Edward's here, look at this. Bodies are all pretty well aligned. Blades are coming out nice and clean. We're not seeing a ton of tapping. This is a pretty solid crew, right? These guys are looking pretty good. So they're going to be a player, I think. They, I think, are going to be a... Look at that release. Look at that release. Boom. Just nice, clean. Letting the boat run. They give it the power. They're smooth and relaxed up the slide. Again, I would get a little bit more height off the release. Just set those blades a little earlier so you don't have to have a little change. If you let the blade come down again, you have to put the blade back up. If you watch my little mouse, it kind of goes down. You have to raise it again. That's vertical motion I don't like. I'd much rather see the extraction straight across, boom, into the water and go. But this, again, is a very, very solid looking crew. Okay, so here, we're going to look at this. Because 2-seat in this boat, which I believe is the St. Edward's, if that's correct. Watch, when I'm talking about the shoulder passing the torso, this is a pretty good example of it. Look, as he draws it in here, here's the shoulder. It's in a pretty neutral position. Watch how it moves back past. See there, right there. Look at that. It's moving past, and that's these strong back muscles here. They're drawing it in. That's what we're talking about, is that nice movement. You see it here? Boom, look at how it moves past the torso in that shoulder girdle, right? It opens up. That's these muscles in the back drawing that handle to the body. And these are good, strong muscles, much stronger than your puny little bicep here. And if you can utilize those to get that full extension here, look at this, hand right up against the body. That's a nice, good draw. Good, tall position. He's not slouched down. This is good. It's a very, very strong position to have through the release of your stroke. Look at this, right? Draws it in. It's probably got a little too much sheeting of water on the blade, but I'm not looking at that right now. Look at that. That's a nice example of what we're talking about, how that shoulder can move past the torso. Boom, opens it up, and we know that he's using those good, strong muscles to get that completion. That's a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. All right, this is going to be the last race that I do. So this is St. Paul's second crew against a Dutch 8. And this is a university 8s, but I think this is a high school crew. I think St. Paul's is a high school crew. So anyways, as we come through here, what we're going to see is, I'm going to turn off the commentary. See, we see here, I think that this guy here should be a little bit taller. See, as he draws it through. See here, he ends up doing sort of a weird thing, because here he's good. Here he's good. But as the weight comes through the middle of the part of the stroke, we see his back start to kind of cave in. And if he could stay tall and drive his shoulders past the hips while maintaining that good straight body, it's kind of like this guy here's keeping that body nice and tall, he's going to get much better power transference to the end of the blade, right? When we see these bodies kind of collapse, see there, he looks pretty good, and then it starts to soften up. That's going to absorb some of that power, right? Likewise, this guy here's maybe opening up a little bit too much. We got blades going deep here. So there's a few things that are going to sap some speed. They're still pretty quick. Like if we watch them at full speed, they're still moving pretty good. But one thing we'll notice here is, where's the blade going in relation to the puddle, right? We're not getting a lot of clearance. So we're not seeing that boat is being sent off as much through each stroke as we would like. So again, if we pay attention to those little details, that's just going to get us a little bit more distance. And here we go, where's point of maximum compression. There we go. Point of maximum compression right there. So look at this. They're at point of maximum compression. They start to lift the hands at that point, and then they're driving, and by the time the blades are fully buried, look how far into their drive they are, right? So we've missed that top quarter of the slide. Look at this guy. He's way through there. And the blades here, they're still not locked. They're still going in. We're rowing it in, and now they get pushed in, right? So they need to take that catch a little bit more as well. That's going to really allow them to get more out of the legs. And that's all going to work to push those puddles past the boat. Because here, look at that. They're dropping in just past the puddles. We'd like to see a little more clearance than that. All right, so I'm not sure how the Dutch are going to do. Because as we see, they've got a solid lead, a firm lead here. But look at the balance as they're coming up the slide. So this is when they're in their just sort of coasted in mode. And we want to make sure that it's all locked in, especially as we come up the recovery, right? The closer we get to the catch, the more those hand heights have to be locked in, the more the bodies need to stay tall over center. And we can see it, that boat's rocking side to side. Now the water is a little bit wobbly, but again, we want to be very precise in what we do, keep the bodies tall, and we take charge of the water and the boat in the water rather than letting the water take charge of us. It's not always going to work. If you get bad water conditions, you're going to bounce around. But if I'm looking at this water, it's not so crazy that they should be bouncing around this much. I feel that this should be a little bit more locked in as they're bringing it into, close out the race mode. It should be just a little bit sharper. So we'll see how they do, but I don't think that they will be one of the upper echelon crews. I think there's crews out there that will be able to handle the conditions better and really keep that boat more stable in this kind of water, especially through the second half of the recovery. So here's what I'm talking about now. You won't be able to hear it because I've muted this. But as we bring it in, see, look at that. There's little tippy taps there on the water. As you see, there's another smack. And this water isn't so bad, right? But look at that, tippity tap. Little pity pats here, see that? Blades bouncing along the water. So things like that to me, again, are red flags, especially when you're trying to be the best crew at Henley, right? When I see that much tapping as a coach, it rubs me raw. It's a cardinal sin. Do not allow those blades to tap. And when you're this far ahead and just sort of bringing it in, be precise. Be precise with your motions. Push the hands down, feather the blade, bottom to the top of the blade, clear the water, and then just come straight up that slide, holding those hands level. Let the blades pass over top of the water. Something like this here, at this point, in this stage, when they're this far ahead, and they've been in, I'm not going to say coast mode, but they've been in, close out the race mode. You need to lock it in. You've got the race in the bag. Be precise. Hit those points. Be mechanically sound. When I see a crew that's not mechanically sound here, it's attention to detail. It's just people not working hard to get those basics down 100%. So when I see something like that at this crew here, it makes me worry for their performance coming up in the later rounds. All right, so that race is in the bag. That's it for my analysis for this section. I'll get these posted. And again, hopefully somebody's watching these, getting something out of it. And feel free to leave likes or comments if you like or want to make a comment. There you go. I think that's it. I'll be back again with more commentary. It's killing me that I'm only on day one. But hey, these are 10-hour videos, 11-hour videos, so it's taking time, right? But eventually I'll get through all the days at Henley.